This is Sudden Impact. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sudden Impact, where I, John, bring you the news from TNA Wrestling. So in this episode, I will review the Bound For Glory PPV and provide an exciting update that TNA Wrestling gave regarding their Impact TV show. This one comes a little bit later than I would have liked it, but unfortunately, otherwise occupied before today. So with all that said, let's get started. So Bound for Glory was an amazing pay-per-view, already setting records for TNA, it being the highest grossing event of the year for TNA and TNA's largest US attendance for this year. It was revealed that the pay-per-view was the most attended Bound for Glory in 11 years. Now this is fantastic news for TNA, and it shows they are slowly regaining some of the interest that they previously lost in the US pro wrestling scene. Are you liking this video? Want to see more? Like, share and subscribe to the channel. It's free and helps me produce more videos like this. Go ahead and do it so I can continue to bring you the news from TNA Wrestling. Moving on to the review of the actual pay-per-view. So starting off with the pre-show, which saw the tag team match between Ash by Elegance and Heather Reckless, following Reckless's makeover, defeat the team of Xia Brookside and Brinley Reese from NXT. Ash and Reckless, who I'm calling from now on Elegance, showed decent chemistry, this being their first match teaming together. And this was a good way to start the event as the personal concierge for Ash, along with Ash, drawing early heat from the crowd just to get them into fine voice for the rest of the show. So I'd like to see these teams continue to have matches teaming together and building their way throughout the division, and also building up the division as well, the tag division. So next on the pre-show was the Hall of Fame ceremony. Now this was a heartfelt and emotional moment for both inductees, with the late Bob Ryder and Rhino being inducted as well. So Eric Young came out first to induct and accept the induction on behalf of Bob Ryder. He talked about Ryder's history with the company, being one of the co-founders of the company, and just how Bob was the nicest guy to be around, and having stayed with the company from its founding to his passing in 2020. Then Tommy Dreamer came out to induct Rhino, who was overcome with emotion, given that he is a Detroit local, and the Detroit fans were just behind Rhino and so supportive of Rhino as well with his Hall of Fame induction. Now for the next match, which turned out to be the last match of the pre-show. It was the Call Your Shot Gauntlet, and it began with Kazarian entering at number 1 and Zachary Wentz entering at number 2. So the other entrants were Jake Something, Trey Miguel, Hammerstone, the returning Rohit Raju, Laredo Kid, Sami Zayn, John Schuyler, Bhupinder Gujar, Trent Seven, Casey Navarro, newly inducted TNA Hall of Famer Rhino, Tasha Steeles, Lei Ying Lee, Jason Hotch, Leon Slater, Jonathan Gresham, JDC, and AJ Francis. So this was a fun match, which saw the return of Rohit Raju to TNA, who he last appeared for the company at the Impact 1000 episode last year. And also, it saw the return of Trey Miguel after his recent surgery and recovering from his injuries. So the final two were Kazarian and Rhino, with Kaz getting the win after delivering a low blow to Rhino. So the main card of the Bound for Glory pay-per-view started with Mike Bailey retaining his championship against El Hijo del Vikingo. This match saw Bailey use more submissions to keep Vikingo grounded. So this would prove key as he ultimately won the match because of this. Of course, there was plenty of high octane and non-stop action, but it also showed that Bailey could prove dangerous as he continues to show his that he's added another element to his wrestling. So the next match was the Knockouts Tag Team Championship match between the champions Spitfire, who successfully defended against Rosemary, and NXT's Wendy Chu. I mean, this was this was a pretty necessary defense, given that Spitfire had only won the championships at last month's Victory Road event. And after the match, however, Rosemary attacked Wendy Chu, who was the one who ended up being pinned. So not really sure why they split up so quickly, but I'm interested in seeing some new challengers face Spitfire for the championships. So up next was the Josh Alexander taking on Steve Macklin. Travel issues kept the Northern Armory from being at ringside to support Alexander or interfere on Alexander's behalf. So this proved quite telling for Josh Alexander because, even though it was a hard-hitting back-and-forth match, Macklin was able to get his win over Alexander finally, and just continue his rise up the card and work his way back to the World Championship eventually. Now, this may have been one of the last few matches that we see Josh Alexander have as a TNA wrestler. Now, if it was, he has nothing left to prove and should be proud that he saw TNA through the early days of their ownership with Anthem, and where they were considered a laughingstock by most wrestling fans. So if it is the last match for him, or one of the last matches, I wish him well. And this was one hell of a match to go out on. The next match was the Monsters Ball match for the Digital Media and International Heavyweight Wrestling Championships between champion PCO and Matt Cardona. The match was a brutal match filled with a lot of weapons and violent and gruesome spots. One in particular stood out where Matt Cardona put a handful of thumbtacks in PCO's mouth before delivering his reboot. So, in the end, however, PCO proved that he was not human and defeated Cardona after he having his wedding, honeymoon, and early stages of marriage to wife Steph DeLander ruined. I hope this means that Cardona moves on to a different feud in the main event, because I'd just love to see Cardona stick around TNA wrestling for a little while longer and just see how he what's next for him, basically. So Moose and Mike Santana was the next match. Now, Santana had been running through the system, taking each member out before facing Moose in what I'm calling the final system shutdown. Now, Santana was ultimately successful in this because JDC was recovering from his Call Your Shot gauntlet match, and Brian Myers and Eddie Edwards were preparing for their Full Metal Mayhem match later that evening. So essentially Moose had no one to support him at ringside and interfere on his behalf again. So much like Josh Alexander didn't have the Northern Armory to rely on, it was, again, Moose couldn't rely on the system for any interference. So again, with this feud over, seemingly, I'd like to see both wrestlers move on to something else in the company. And Jordan Grace was up next to defend her Knockouts World Championship against Masha Slamovich. Now, this was a rematch from the 2022 Bound for Glory in what was called the best Knockouts match in the company's history. This was another awesome match with both wrestlers hitting highly impactful moves and also with callbacks to TNA's history, including an attempted muscle buster and a move that was used by Jerry Lynn in the early days of TNA. Now, after all was said and done, Slamovich exercised her demons from 2 years ago and won the Knockouts Championship. This may have also been one of Grace's last matches in TNA, with her contract also up in early 2025. She has also done everything in TNA, being the first and currently only female Grand Slam champion. Although it would be interesting to see how she would be as a heel, running through her opponents on her way back to the Knockouts Championship, or it would be interesting to see how she would also go as wrestling as part of the X Division, or being involved in X Division matches or feuds going forward. Now, the next match was a weird had a weird placement because I think it personally should have main evented. Now, this was the World Championship match between Nick Nemeth and viral sensation Joe Hendry. The crowd was hot and behind Hendry from the moment he walked out to the ring after backstage producer Ace Steel gave him a pep talk. Now, the Call Your Shot winner from earlier, Kazarian, was the special referee for this match as well. And he also teased calling his shot several times, eventually being stopped by JBL, who took him out with a clothesline from hell. On the way out, JBL stopped and said something to Joe Hendry before also taking him out with a clothesline from hell. So this set up Nick Nemeth, who didn't see what happened with JBL getting involved in the match, taking out both Kazarian and Joe Hendry. So he just capitalized on Hendry's grogginess and hit him with a danger zone to get the pin and retain the championship. Now, after this match, TNA recapped the earlier Hall of Fame ceremony for everyone to see on the pay-per-view. And also, Santina Marella appeared afterwards to congratulate both inductees and state how TNA was going to build momentum from this event going into 2025. More on that later. So, immediately after this, a video preview was shown for the next pay-per-view in January. Yes, TNA is bringing back Genesis with it being held in the Curtis Colwell Center in Dallas, Texas. Now, this brings us to the main event. Now, while I didn't get to watch this match in its entirety on the evening because my TNA Plus had some glitches in it, I was able to catch the match at a later date, and it was a fantastic match. Typical Hardy main event with basically it being a Full Metal Mayhem match, basically a tables, ladders, and chairs match, or anything metal involved that could be used, and having the championship suspended above the ring as well. So basically, making it TNA's version of a TLC match. So there was also a lot of high risk spots and use of the tables, ladders, and chairs, and anything that was metal. And basically, there was also a point where during the match where Brian Myers climbed the ladder in the corner of the ring while Chris Bay was holding onto the championships, and in what was in a moment that was reminiscent of Edge spearing Jeff Hardy at WrestleMania 17 in 2000, TLC 1. Brian Myers did the same to Chris Bay. And after that, it was basically back and forth action between all of the teams, with Myers and Edwards and Ace and ABC and the Hardys all teasing going for the championship, only to be stopped by the other teams. Eventually, it was the Hardys that pulled both championships down to win the match. And with that all said, Bound for Glory was in the books for 2024. Now, we looked to this week's Impact for the Fallout. TNA Wrestling announced that that they were going to have a live edition of Impact after the Genesis pay-per-view, and this continues TNA's rebirth as it strives to reclaim some of the popularity that it had previously. And of course, Anthem, Access TV is owned by Anthem as well, and goes to show that TNA and Anthem are just trying to build on the popularity and the momentum of TNA during the rebrand. So that's all for this episode. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments down below. And until next time, I'm John, and this has been Sudden Impact.